today here in Chicago, is just watching everybody from all over the world who takes time out to learn about all things sustainability, to get inspired, and as we always say, to move towards action, towards doing something, and to spreading the word. So as we've talked about before, and as we announced in Abu Dhabi, the sustainability curriculum now is completely digitized, completely online. And please tell everybody you know about it. Check it out yourself, because now there's no excuse not to do it. You can do it whenever you have time. You do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, in between busy work schedules, and you can earn that badge and become educated on the issues of sustainability that affect us every day in food service. So please talk to people you know and spread that word. So with that, we're going to kick it off. We have Anne McBride, who's joining us today. And before I say welcome officially, I'm going to read your bio, or at least parts of it, because it's enormous. Yeah, I know. It's like, so humble and all. But Anne McBride, Dr. Anne McBride, she is Vice President of Programs at the James Beard Foundation, that we're going to be talking about a whole lot today. And in that capacity, she oversees the James Beard Foundation's initiatives around industry support, women's leadership, policy advocacy, sustainability, education, and scholarships. She has like nothing to do over there. She holds a PhD in food studies from New York University, with research focusing on the changing role of the chef in the 21st century. Previously, Anne was deputy director of the Torrebera Mediterranean Center, a joint project of the University of Barcelona and the Culinary Institute of America. And that's actually where we spent a lot of time working together, which I'll get to in a minute. But they really focused on the intersection of health, sustainability, and flavor. She remains a member of its Culinary and Food Studies Advisory Council. She's a member of the Menus of Change Scientific and Technical Advisory Council, CIA's Master in Food Systems Sustainability Advisory Council, on and on and on. Oh, by the way, she is co-author of 7 books. Does overachiever apply to you, Anne? I'm just saying.
I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah. And but really, one of the fun things, this is the fun fact for today. So Anne is a native of Switzerland. And the first time we met, I don't know how we got on the topic, but when I was a high school student, I was a foreign exchange student in Switzerland in a little tiny town called Schule. And it just so happens that it was your grandparents?
My grandparents lived there. My grandfather was the mayor of that town when you were there.
Go figure. I mean, it's like, so you would spend weekends there. So there is a likelihood that we pass each other on like the 3 streets of this town. I mean, it's that tiny. But anyways, how much fun is that? And welcome, and thank you for getting up early and taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chris. It's so great to reconnect with you. Yes,
I will also say that it is an added pleasure to have you here, because as we've talked about with other guests who joined us in the past, when we did that sustainability curriculum, we always relied on experts, and we relied on experts to help us with different parts of it. And Anne was the driving force behind number 8, which is nutrition and sustainability and that intersection. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Anne, for taking the time to have worked on that with us and really produce something that's pretty exciting. So round of applause for everybody. With that, let's start with just James Beard Foundation, okay? Because, in the US, James Beard Foundation is a pretty big thing, but can you just sort of talk about it for everybody who's joining us from all corners of the world, and just sort of talk about the foundation first?
Sure. So the James Beard Foundation is still probably mostly known for its awards program. The James Beard Awards recognize restaurants, journalists, book authors from all over the U.S. Once a year, and I think the awards program is about 30 years old. And in more recent years, we started doing impact programs to support chefs, which is where I come in. We also do dinners. We did dinners for 25 years at the James Beard House very regularly, which was a rite of passage for a lot of chefs in the US to come cook at the James Beard House. We're actually opening a public space for any of you who will be in New York visiting next year. And any year after that, on the Hudson River, Pier 57, a food hall where we'll have our own space, and we curated the chef there too. So I invite you all to visit us in the public-facing embodiment of our mission next time you're in New York. But so back to the part that I play at the foundation, which is on anything industry facing, because what we do is celebrate and support the people behind America's food culture, to establish new standards around excellence, equity, and sustainability. But it's not just telling chefs, hey, you need to do better. It's really about creating programs that provide chefs with resources and training to help make your workplace more sustainable, more equitable, and with new standards of excellence. So I oversee things like our 10-year-old chef bootcamp for policy and change, where we take chefs in a remote location for 3 days to give them policy advocacy training. Because as chefs, you have, as Chris said, the power of the white jacket, from touching people, the people you interact with as suppliers, the people you interact with as diners, the legislators who come in your dining room, et cetera. So you have so much power. What do you do with that? How do you cultivate your voice? How do you craft a message? We do a lot on women's leadership programs, also for women owners at this point, mostly, but also working on training programs for women who are not owners. There's a huge gap in access to capital for women, and particularly for women of color. So what is the training we can give them to help them grow their businesses? If you have 1 or 2, you want to get to 5 or 6, or you want to grow your existing restaurants, grow alternate revenue streams. So we have a program in partnership with Cornell around that.
You have so many hats that you wear over there. But before I get into the specifics of the different areas you do, I just really quickly, one more piece of background. James Beard, who was he? Can you just sort of, I mean, he was in the US, pretty famous name, but go ahead and can you do a little download on that?
Sure. James Beard was really the father of American cuisine. And I think it's not that long ago that people would snicker if you'd say American cuisine and be like, oh, y'all are just hamburgers and ketchup, right? And James Beard was part of a generation of chefs who started in the middle part of the 20th century to really show the incredible bounty of American ingredients, of farm-raised ingredients, all of the regional nuances around American cuisine, all of the influence of immigrants and other people, on the American soil. The fact that this is a cuisine that starts from indigenous people cooking what was here, and then people who have brought in their flavors, their ingredients, their techniques over generations and generations. So he was a food writer, he was a celebrity TV chef just at the very beginning of that, which is why when he passed away, a group of his friends decided to buy his townhouse in the West Village in New York and make it a place where American cuisine and culture would be celebrated. And that's how the James Beard Foundation was started.
There you go. So it's kind of neat because James Beard, you can almost say that he was all about this concept now that's like so popular worldwide of, local, hyper local, sustainable. That was him. And it was a time in the US when we weren't always doing that. So it's an important person. The other thing, by the way, just to note, is that if you are in the US and you get a James Beard Award for something, that's a really big deal. I mean, that's a big, big deal. So yeah, it's a very important foundation. So let's go back to, you said a couple things. I just want to have you expand on this and expand on it maybe from the perspective of sustainability. The one thing you mentioned just a few moments ago is policy, that you have these sort of policy workshops. And it's kind of funny to me that, when I started in the food business, chefs were, we were just chefs, right? We would go in the kitchen, nobody knew who we were, we did our thing and made people happy. And today the role of the chef is so much bigger. And we talk about that power of the white jacket. What do you cover when somebody goes on one of these policy retreats? What are the takeaways that you hope that those chefs get?
So the very concrete takeaway is a clear message that we help them workshop. They spend significant amount of time on that, on crafting their message as something that they can take back to call their state representative, for example, or their mayor, or depending at which level they want action, or even a clear sense of what program to do and how to enlist the people in their dining room, which is something that we really stress upon them. One thing that we hear a lot from chefs at boot camp is, wow, I thought I was the only one who felt this way, or I didn't realize I had a voice. I didn't know how to use my voice. And so the training that they get there is also quite simply the confidence to collect your power and use it. So for example, we've had people who, we give general policy training that chefs can then apply to the issue that they are more concerned about. So it might be something around fair wages, it might be something around SNAP, which is the newer term for food stamps, if any of you have heard that, free school lunches. So we tell them, we workshop that with them in terms of where are the most impactful areas on where you should focus at the local, state, or federal level to make any sort of change. Where do you message what? Sometimes it is on your menu that you can add something. Not everything will result in a conversation with your US senator, for example, right? What are the steps, large and small, that you can make? And so when you leave there, you have a clearer, more crystallized sense of the issue you want to focus on, how to focus on it, and what you want to say about it, including how it relates to you.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's what we also show is the chefs cook a collaborative dinner together. They also spend time outdoors together. We're going to Louisiana next week, and we will be at a trappers camp in the marshland, surrounded by wild boars, et cetera, talking about conservation. And there's a lot of land erosion, et cetera, in Louisiana, coastal land erosion. So talking about conservation. And it's really showing that whether you're outdoors picking ingredients, you're cooking a collaborative dinner together, or you're actually in a classroom watching a PowerPoint and hearing someone talk, all of that is part of advocacy.
Really interesting, because I know there's a lot of people who are listening right now who would love to be more involved, would love to be, have more of a voice, because we do have things to say. And I think it's maybe a follow-up discussion for the two of us to have, just about, if for instance, we could publish maybe a few suggestions from the James Beard Foundation, about how to be a better advocate, because most people aren't going to be able to come and go to a workshop from, Miramar or Australia, but I think the techniques and the messaging pertains to any part of the world that chefs find themselves in. We have power, but you're right. I mean, it's how do you use that voice? And if you were just going to, give two fast suggestions for somebody listening today, what would you tell them, in terms of being a better advocate, or maybe doing it for the first time?
So two very simple and basic suggestion is, one, what is the issue that you want to be an advocate for, right? And it can be, you want to be an advocate for better ingredients, more local sourcing in your community or in your own restaurant, better wages for your staff. If you are your level of decision making doesn't have to be, oh, this only works if you are the owner or the executive chef. You're a line cook. You have some power as well also, right, within your organization. Advocacy might be, hey, I want to use a more sustainable source of X animal protein, X produce. I want to change how we are scheduling shifts because that's better for the team, those kind of things. So what is the issue that you feel most strongly about? And then to work on an elevator pitch for that, because I think we're all very passionate about what we're doing. And sometimes that can result in just very, very big statements that can take a long time to actually hone in on the issue. So work on having something that if you're literally riding an elevator with someone, you can tell them what the issue you care about is and why it's important and how they can participate in the change making with you. Something as simple as, here's how you're going to tell your general manager how to schedule shifts differently because that's better for the team.
So keep it simple. Talk about what's important to you, why it's important to you, and how they can help. All right, make a note, everybody. That's good. So you also mentioned women's policy. And I guess I'd just like to, ask you to talk a little bit more about that, because Well, go ahead and start that. I'm going to follow up with another question, but let's start there.
Great. And I'll put also in the chat, after I answer your question, we have a virtual education library where we record all of our webinars. So I'll put that in the chat for anyone who is in the Maldives, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in Turkey, because we do, our program is focused in the US, but I've seen the last 2 years, we've done a lot of virtual recording or virtual programming, and that's something that we're going to continue doing. So fear not, you don't have to be able to come to a trappers camp in Louisiana to participate in what we're doing. So the Women's Leadership Program is really about strengthening the skills that women already have. One of the big things that we do there is around financial literacy, because one of the things that we see with a lot of the participants in the program is a lack of either fluidity, comfort, or confidence, and sometimes all three, around financials, for example. And that's unfortunately something that is often very gendered, where women are not as comfortable articulating questions or statements around the capital that they need for their restaurants, for example. So just also strengthening network, giving both the expert-led knowledge, if you want, through Cornell and through JBF, but also as peers, understanding and networking through any question that you have, because anyone else has probably encountered the same thing. That's a really important part of what we do also. So that's all part of the programming that we offer around women. The Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Program is our flagship. It's a 10-week virtual program now in partnership with Cornell University. And the outcome of that is articulating your vision for growth really clearly, back to this simple crystallized message that you can really share, with the idea that at the end of it, it's something that you can take to investors, you can take to the bank, you can take back to your business, and you can even just take for yourself, knowing how you want to grow, why you want to grow, and how you're going to do it.
And you guys are also involved in seafood, aren't you?
Correct. We have a seafood sustainability program called Smart Catch that some of you might be familiar with. And one of the, so that's a program that existed pre-pandemic. In its newest incarnation, one of the things that we've done is, it used to be only green and yellow species were allowed on menus. So it's an audit of menus that chefs submit, and then they receive their Smart Catch classification based on the sustainability of their seafood menu. We tell them, we work with Postelsia on that. You have too much of that. Here are things that are red flags on your menu. But one of the things that the newest incarnation we relaunched last year did was acknowledge progress. And so you are allowed 2 red listed species as part of it, because I think we all want to aim for perfection. We all want to be 100% sustainable, but there's such a journey to get there, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really important to acknowledge that progress is also part of the journey, that as a chef, turning around your menu entirely from 0 to 100% sustainable, 100% green species might be challenging if you're not there yet. So here is how to get there. And we're still going to incorporate you. You're still part of this. We're going to support you on that journey so that you can get to no red species whatsoever. But we're also, cognizant of the fact that this is not an overnight action.
I like that concept, which we've talked about many times, of, we all want to do the right thing, but it's not always possible to do the right thing all the time. But that's the goal. That's where we want to move towards. I like what, I think one of the really neat things about what James Beard is doing is, not just, an award sort of organization that, that pats people on the back and says you're doing a great job, but actually empowering people. So, and as I mentioned earlier, you were part of our 8th, you're driving force behind the 8th module in the sustainability curriculum. Up until that point, we really just focused on, on food, on energy, on water, on waste. And then we moved into nutrition. And one of the areas of sustainability, and I just want to sort of get your take on this a little bit, that we have not really done a whole lot with, although we've talked about it a lot in these webcasts, are all the social pieces around sustainability, and there are many. I would just like to, maybe get your thoughts on that, and maybe even challenge us a little bit. And how does James Beard Foundation think about that aspect of sustainability?
So our definition of sustainability, which I put in the chat, the link to our virtual events page, but if you just go to jamesbeard.org, you access everything else about us. Our definition of sustainability is environmental as well as economic and social. I'll quickly cover the economic piece also. You're only a sustainable restaurant if you are an open restaurant, right? If your doors are closed, you're not sustainable. So part of it is, how do you make change in a way that is economically sustainable? How do you rethink the business model of the restaurant, which we have realized over the last 2.5 years is not a sustainable business model, at least not in the US and in much of Western Europe also. So the being sustainable can be challenging, including on the social elements, which I'll cover now, and that is better wages. That's a huge part. Health insurance benefits. And I'm sorry for those of you who are not in the US and you're like, what do you mean you don't get health insurance, or especially in independent restaurants? Obviously, that's a big challenge here, getting benefits. So one of the things that we do at the foundation is really supporting people throughout their career in the industry, their entire life cycle. And the programs department that I oversee, what I always say is we're turning restaurant work into restaurant career. That's hugely important. The fact that as a 20-something, you're taking a job in a restaurant, not because, you wanted to be an actor and that didn't work out or something, or you're doing something on the side, your real passion on the side, and you work in restaurants. But no, you're getting into the restaurant industry in your 20s because you really want to. And how do you retire from the restaurant industry? Not having necessarily owned anything or anything like that, but how do you as an employee work in have the structure in place that allows you to spend decades in this, save money, get a 401k, that's a retirement program, get health benefit that keep you healthy enough to work in restaurants for a decade, et cetera. So that is the social element of sustainability. It's a sustainability of the people who work in this industry. I think there's been a realization over the last few years that it's not okay if the pigs on the menu are treated better than the staff cooking and serving the pork plates, right? That's hugely important. We have not worried about that for too long. For a lot of the sustainability movements, it has been a bit about only talking about the health of the animals, right? Is the food on the plate, was it raised humanly, antibiotic free, massaged before being served to you, all these things. But it doesn't matter if the person who's cooking it has 2 other jobs to make a living. If the server who's bringing you the plate has a 2-hour commute to get home because there's no affordable housing near the restaurant, for example. So that is the social element of sustainability, and something that we work very strongly around. Also, we have on our website a compensation benefit and growth guide that we did last year, because one of the things that's also important there's not just one scenario. You all come from all over the world, you represent different size of operations, you have X number of staffers. Even at the US scale, someone in Georgia is going to think about things differently than someone in Alaska, than someone in Florida, than someone in New York City. So that guide, and in general our work, really tries to cover a broad spectrum geographically and in terms of size of operations, to be really useful and to show case studies. So we have a lot of chefs who are showing sharing the type of benefits they offer, how they incentivize their staff, how they how they take care also of their staff's not just physical well-being, which can be yoga. Instead of shift drinks, you go for a run before work, those kind of things, mental health program, all of that.
Excellent. So I think this is a really important time to think about those economic and social pieces. Because as we all know, labor, we're hearing it not just in the US, but across the world, that there just aren't enough workers in our industry. And that's really, really a problem. So we're sort of coming up on the end of our time here. I do have one question here that just came in. And I think this person is oh, you have another question. Interesting. Is really sort of asking. I think there's a question about, growing food waste. How do we address that? We're trying to do more with plant-based, but at the same time that creates a lot more waste. And how do we deal with that?
So, and if you've watched the module 8 of the sustainability curriculum, you know how I feel about that, very much around plant forward rather than plant-based strictly, unless plant-based is vegetables, because I don't want to end up in a scenario where we eat more plants, but it's all overly processed also, right? Which is often the problem in a lot of things. So I think that addresses the food waste part. If we are using whole ingredients, but really thinking how to use absolutely everything to reduce food waste, starting in the kitchen. I mean, we know that most of the food waste is actually at the consumer level, right? So what you do around portion sizes, if you're doing buffets, how do you make sure there's not a huge amount of waste there, all those kind of things, because that is where most of it happens. But in terms of plant-based and food waste, fermentation, pickling, drying, dehydrating, etc., using vegetables, creating a pantry of vegetables if you want, that you can really use throughout the year, or even freezing your own vegetables or those kind of things. To mitigate the waste that you will do because they're going bad. Fruits are going bad, make jam, make a sauce, freeze that, those kind of things, right? So to really think very creatively about using everything that is in your kitchen and become naturally more plant-centric on your menus.
Excellent. All right, really fast question or answer, I guess, to this fast question. What's up for 2023 for seafood sustainability?
So we are working on a sustainability standard, which will cover seafood and then cover a lot of other things that we will be launching in 2023. So on the James Beard side, that's what's up for seafood sustainability. I think in general for seafood sustainability, it's always very complicated because it's not just this type of fish, but from which side of the ocean or the river, right. All of that is very, very tricky. So the good news is there's a lot of resources around seafood sustainability everywhere. So continue educating yourself around that. Make sure you always Google the type of seafood or fish that you want to be putting on your menu, that you really research. Do less and be more sustainable. So have fewer species on your menu, for example, but make sure that they are more sustainable would be my advice there. Awesome.
All right, we are pretty much out of time. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm doing two things at once here. I think, Anne, just one really quick question. If you were to give everybody listening one piece of advice, what would it be?
About
That's
anything?
A surprise question. Yeah.
Really look at the power that you have in your daily life, in a work context in this environment, and think about one thing you can do differently tomorrow that you're doing today, and how that small change, what you'll do differently tomorrow, will impact others better. What can you do for your staff? What can you do for yourself? Is there something do you need to take a pause and breathe for yourself, right? And reframe how you're thinking. Take care of yourself, take care of others. I think that's how then you take care of the planet also. That would be my advice.
Awesome. It's so heartwarming just to see what the James Beard Foundation is doing. And it's fascinating to me. There's so many of us and so many organizations, World Chefs included, that are, trying to do more to spread the word, educate, empower. And it's really a growing global community. So, Anne, a huge thank you for joining us today. And also talking a lot about some of these social things that we don't always talk about a lot, but they're incredibly important. So with that, a huge shout out to Lynn, who is a raspy voiced Lynn today in Paris. Thank you for making all of this happen. And of course, for all of you who have taken the time out of your busy schedules, time is the ultimate gift and resource. So thank you. And I hope that you continue doing what we need to do to use that power of the white jacket to do the right thing and to affect the world positively in terms of all things sustainable. So with that, Anne, thank you. And I know you are crazy busy traveling all over. You got up early, and I so appreciate it. And with
Thank
that,
you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure to have this conversation.
yes, we'll see you soon in Chicago. So
Yes.
anyways, thanks everybody. Have a great day and evening.